All right. And this is Brandon Helwig of UCFsports.com. And I'm honored to be joined today by BJ Rains, who, if you've been following Boise for any length of time, he's a preeminent reporter covering Boise State athletics. Covered the program for the Idaho Press from 2013 to 2021, and last year began his own independent venture, Bronco Nation News. Welcome, BJ.
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on. Appreciate the kind words.
Yeah, well, first of all, tell me a little bit about Bronco Nation News. Obviously, you're independent. You have the flexibility to do what you want and expand your coverage. I've been really impressed with the website and all the live streams and all the shows you're doing. Tell us a little bit about what you do now with Bronco Nation.
Yeah, it's been fun. Like you said, I was with the paper for 9 years and just kind of decided, hey, man, it's time to branch out and do my own thing. And we got some sponsors that stepped up, and we've got, a columnist, we got a full-time writer, and then we've got myself that does a lot of the video stuff and writes some as well. And so, yeah, we do daily morning shows, essentially like a daily sports talk, radio show, essentially on YouTube and StreamYard, like the platform we're using here, and Facebook and Twitter. And so we're big on social media with the live shows. We do pre and post game shows from all the games. So take a lot of fan comments and questions through the YouTube chat. And then, so a lot of interactive video podcast stuff, but then still a lot of daily written content and features as well. So we're just trying to, in this digital age of sports media, trying to be there at the top and be in that first spot that folks go for their Boise State coverage. And it's been a lot of fun. So I'm excited about where we're going and where we've built it. And I think it's pretty cool with what we've been able to do so far.
Awesome. So before we kind of dive into the football season and the game, we guess we always got to talk about conference realignment. It was obviously the hot topic really the last couple of years. UCF got the call up they were hoping for. I know Boise State is a program that is just as deserving, if not more so, when you talk about the teams who have earned it on the field over the last 20 plus years. Boise State definitely deserves, to be a Power 5 program. So what's kind of your perspective on how things kind of went down? Obviously, the Pac-12 just crumbled pretty much. Yeah. I know there's talk about, maybe the Mountain West could be, absorbing Oregon State and Washington State. What's kind of been the Boise State perspective on this whole process?
Yeah, I mean, especially playing like UCF this week. I mean, Boise State fans are probably a little bit jealous. I mean, they feel like they, on the field for a longer period of time, have had more success than UCF. I know UCF fans would argue that with the national championship that they claim and all that. Boise State fans, frankly, kind of see that as a joke. They obviously had their own undefeated seasons and didn't come forward with that. But they feel like they kind of set the path, and they've got the three New Year's Six BCS wins themselves, and so they started obviously earlier. If you go back to 2000 and some of the things. So Boise State fans will look at the last 23, 24 years and claim that they've been the stronger, program over time. So to see UCF get the Big 12 invite and not them, I think a lot of them were disappointed. And like I said, frankly, probably a little bit jealous. They wish that was them. So I think this week, as a side story, is a big game for fans and stuff to kind of prove, that, hey, we're just as good as UCF and things like that. And whether that leads to conference realignment and bigger conferences, who knows? I mean, I think they always held out hope that they could get in the Big 12 as well. I think there was talk, a year or two ago about them in Memphis maybe being in the next wave. They obviously were hoping when UCF got in, they would be considered. I think they were hoping at some point the Pac-12 might come a calling too. But now that's obviously not happening. So I think, they obviously, they want to get in the playoff, obviously, and the way the new setup is, the way the new format is, even if they switch it to like a 5+7, like one of these Power 4 conference teams is probably going to get a guaranteed spot. And I think a lot of people say, hey, you could argue that Boise State has a better chance than UCF to get in the playoff, moving forward here, because they are going to have an easier schedule and just need to win their conference. And it's much more attainable probably in the Mountain West than to do it in the Big 12. So I think fans are looking at the positives. You add Washington State, add Oregon State, that's probably what's going to happen. I guess the only kind of drama left is, do they call it the Mountain West, or do they reverse merge it and call it the Pac-12 to keep some of those assets? I think that's still to be determined, I guess. But overall, I think that they would love to be in the Big 12, would love to be in a power conference, but at this point, it's all about making the playoff and becoming nationally relevant again. And I think that's still possible for them to do, even in whatever conference this is called moving forward.
Yeah. do Boise State fans, do they ever think about, for UCF fans, they always, go back and think about, that Big East when Boise State initially agreed to join it, when they still thought it was going to, retain an automatic qualifier to a BCS bowl, what eventually became Power 5 and NY6 bowls. Obviously they withdrew and San Diego State followed suit. It looks like that still was the right decision to make. I don't know if things would have been different, in terms of, being more attractive to the Big 12 or what have you. But is that something that the fan base thinks about and debates to this day, whether that was the right move or not?
Not really. I think it was obviously the right move. Once they lost the automatic qualifier, it didn't really make much sense to be going all the way across to the East Coast. And, ever since they came back and still won another Fiesta Bowl in 2014 after that. I guess you can always play the what if game, but I think long term, Boise State just kind of realized that, for the other sports and they got a really sweet deal to come back to the Mountain West too. So they were able to leverage that into more TV money than the other schools and some other nice things out of it. So I think it made sense. Like I said, they would have loved for Big 12 or Pac-12. But in the end, Boise State just doesn't have the money for the softball and volleyball teams to be traveling to the East Coast and stuff like that. I know in the Big East that was going to be football only, but it would have really hurt the other sports to go into a lesser conference like the Big West. So I think that this ends up working out nice right now. And like I said, if the ultimate goal is to win, to get into the playoff, I think UCF fans would even probably agree. If you just look at the straight facts, it's going to be harder to get it to the, at least in the short term, it's going to be harder. It'd be harder to get to the playoff from the Big 12 as a UCF than it would be to win the Mountain West. So, not to say who's the better team, who's the better program, all that, right. But if your goal is to strictly get in the playoff, I think the selling point for Boise State fans is starting next year, they're going to have a legitimate chance to still do that.
Yeah, when we talk about, obviously, last week's games, the week one of college football with UCF, they're hosting Kent State, one of the worst programs really in FBS, brand new coaching staff, new players, won that game handily 56-6. They didn't have to open up the playbook at all. Contrasting, Boise State has to go on the road and play one of the best teams in college football in Washington, has a fantastic offense. Obviously, Boise lost 46-19. I guess what were your primary takeaways from that? Was that result, what was surprising about that result to you?
Well, you said 46-19. It was actually worse, 56-19.
56-19.
It was not pretty at all. 37-point loss. It was one of the largest margin defeats they've had in like the last 25 years. It was not a pretty game. I do think the score, if you watch like the second half of the third quarter and the fourth quarter, the score got away from them a little bit there. I wouldn't say it was a 37-point margin. A fair representation of the score was probably like a 42-19 or something. They certainly lost bad, but there was a couple late touchdowns that made it, I think, worse than most of the game was, because you're there in the middle of the second quarter and Boise State's winning 9-7. I think that they were 15-point underdogs. Boise State was not supposed to win that game. They were supposed to lose by double digits, which they did. So I think the final score and the way it kind of went, it really wasn't what a lot of people expected, but I don't think a lot of honest, Boise State fans would have told you they expected to win the game. So whether you lost by 1, whether you lost by 37, it wasn't pretty, but it was what most people expected. When you were doing your season win-loss predictions, mostly everybody had a loss at Washington. So in the end, it didn't do a ton there. It did expose some significant issues they have, but I think also it's going to prove that Washington is one of the better teams in the country. So does it take a little luster off the game on Saturday? Maybe, just from the fact that it was such a bad loss, but I don't think a lot of people expected them to win anyway. So like I said, the margin of victory doesn't really matter much. I do think Boise State's going to play a lot better against UCF. There were a lot of small things that were issues that I don't see being issues moving forward. They dropped 6 passes. Drops were not a problem last year, and it's the same receivers, and they just on a couple key third downs just had bad drops. You wouldn't expect that to continue. They had a penalty that took away a first down that would have kept the drive going. They had a cleat issue where a lot of their cleats were slipping on the turf. And I'm not making excuses, and I'm not saying Boise State would have won the game. They probably wouldn't have, but I just think there were some very easy correctable things that would have made the score much more respectable. And they're pretty confident that they're going to look significantly better when they come out against UCF on Saturday.
Yeah, I mean, we won't really, even for UCF, we don't really have a true sense of how good this team is until this Boise game coming up. We can't take away anything from last week. I know it's kind of a different situation, with playing Washington. What would you say were the biggest concerns? I know it's just one game, and we'll learn a lot after this game. Is it the offense? I know the quarterback threw a couple turnovers, new offensive coordinator. Is it the defense? Giving up the 56 points, but then you look at Washington's offense is stellar. I think in one of your articles you said it was the most points given up in regulation for Boise since '98, but you maybe have to throw that out the window a little bit given the team you were playing.
Yeah, and I mean, if I'm a UCF fan, I'm licking my chops. Sure, I get it. I mean, you're seeing what they did in the stats, and I watched Malzahn's press conference, and somebody asked about all the passing yards Boise State gave up, and is that going to be something UCF, or another game where they should exploit that. But you had a lot of guys getting their first starts in the secondary that I think were just had some easy mistakes that can be corrected. I mentioned the slipping. I mean, again, not an excuse, but there was some issue with Boise State's cleats. And on a couple of those touchdowns, guys fell down or slipped, and there were wide open guys going down the middle of the field. So, again, not to say they would have won the game, but at least two of those long, 50-yard touchdowns, guys just literally fell down coming off the line of scrimmage. So they feel like there's some correctable things there. They had a lot of guys stepping into new roles, and I think it was just a perfect storm going up against Penix. And, would Boise State have, they play North Dakota next week? Would they have rather played North Dakota in the first game and got some things out of the way? Sure. But, that's just not the way it works. And Boise State usually plays a fairly tough first game. And so it is what it is. I would say the biggest concerns probably were the pass defense. As I said, you lost two safeties to the NFL. You felt good about the guys replacing them, but obviously they didn't have their best games. Again, the question is how good is Washington versus how bad is Boise State? And obviously it's somewhere in the middle there. You just don't exactly know where. But I would say the pass defense certainly was the big concern. Not that concerned about the offense, to be honest. I think the offense actually looked pretty good. The main issue was everybody going into the season thought they were going to run the ball more. I mean, they have two of the best running backs in the Mountain West, plus a quarterback that rushed for 600 yards last year. So a lot of people just expected them to run the ball, 65-70% of the time. For whatever reason, they came out slinging the ball. They thought they had some things they could attack in the passing game against Washington, and it didn't really work. So I think they're going to run the ball a lot more against UCF. I think you're going to see the design QB runs a lot more against UCF. I think they just tried to get a little cute and realize that what everybody thought would be the bread and butter of this team, the running game, will get back to being that because they ran the ball well. They had averaged 5 yards a carry, and their long run was 13 yards. So it wasn't like they had some really long run that skewed the stats. I mean, they were very consistent in the running game, and they just didn't run very much, only 28 attempts to 49 passing attempts. And I know in the second half, when the game got out of reach, they had to throw more. But even in the first half, it was 24 passes to 13 runs. And I think a lot of people would have expected that to be flipped. So I think the offensive coordinator just got a little cute, tried to outthink himself, outsmart himself. And he was saying in the press conference Monday, yeah, we need to, we have guys that can run the football, and we need to get back to doing that. So I would suspect them to run the ball a lot more on Saturday. So I'm not, again, in the drops, there were 6 drops. A couple of them were big key third down drops, but that's never been a problem for these guys. So I'm not that worried about the offense. And again, there is definitely some concern with the defense. But again, how much of that was just Washington being really good? I think we're going to get another, UCF's going to say, they're saying they're going to measure themselves, see where they're at on Saturday. Boise State feels the same way because no disrespect to UCF, but they know that they're not Washington. And so they feel like they're going to get a chance to show more of who they are on Saturday as well.
Yeah, you talked a lot about the offense. Bush Hamdan, he was a former Boise quarterback with the Dan Hawkins era, and he's back. Is this the first time he's kind of been his own offensive coordinator and called plays and developed game plans? Is this kind of a debut for him?
Yeah, I mean, he was at Washington with Chris Peterson. He was actually the quarterbacks coach for the Atlanta Falcons for a year with Matt Ryan. He has some NFL experience, and then he spent the last couple of years at Missouri. He was the offensive coordinator and quarterbacks coach, but Eli Drinkwitz, the head coach, was calling the plays.
Okay.
You're still talking about an SEC offensive coordinator / QB coach. He got the experience there. But the last 3 games of the season last year, they handed the play calling duties over to him. And by all accounts from Missouri fans and reporters, that was the best best the Missouri offense had looked all season was the last 3 games when he took over as play caller. So he actually took about $100,000 pay cut to leave the SEC and Missouri to come back to his alma mater at Boise State and be the offensive coordinator. I still don't honestly know why. If he's thinking that maybe he'll be the head coach someday if Avalos leaves, I mean, I have no idea. Maybe he just loves Boise, wanted to come back. Maybe he didn't like working at Missouri. I have no idea. But he took a significant pay cut to come back, and by all accounts is a bright offensive mind. And a lot of people think that he's going to mesh well with Taylon Green, the young quarterback here. And I mean, coming into the season, people in Boise thought this offense was going to be one of the best offenses in the country. I mean, they have a dynamic quarterback that can run, that can pass. They have, I mentioned 2,000-yard running backs. They've got, talented receivers. And like I said, 19 points against Washington was not what people expected, but there's not a lot of concern with Bush Hamden in the offense. I think it was just one of those games where it didn't work. And I think that the fans are still pretty high and expect this offense to be a lot better starting Saturday.
Yeah, you just touched a little bit on quarterback Taylon Green. Tell me a little bit more about him and his development. I know he was a redshirt freshman last year, and kind of, when did he start it? Was he the starter at the beginning of last season, or was it a situation where he kind of earned the job and finished the season?
So they started 2-2. They had like an embarrassing loss to UTEP, which was one of the worst losses in program history. And after that game, the starting quarterback, Hank Bachmeier, entered the transfer portal. Since it was only 4 games, he could save the year of eligibility and count it as a red shirt, and that kind of shocked some people. They also fired the offensive coordinator at the same time, and so they went new offensive coordinator and new quarterback for the starting with game 5. He went 8-2 as the starter down the stretch, won the bowl game with a big performance. I think he had 2 70-plus yard touchdown runs. He is literally by the metrics, by the coaches, by the numbers, he's the fastest player on Boise State's team, and he's the quarterback. So you're talking about a 6'6" quarterback. I mean, the comparisons to Vince Young are out there, and he wears the same number. He's from Texas. He looks just like him in terms of when you see him out there. He towers over the line of scrimmage. Last year he ran a lot, and then the whole offseason the thought was, hey, you got to keep him healthy, got to protect him. Let's make him more of a quarterback and more of a pocket passer and not just have him take off and run every play. And so I think some of that backfired a little bit in the Washington game where he was trying too much to force balls and stuff instead of just taking off when he was open and things like that. So that's why I think that you're going to see him, when he gets in the open field, he's hard to catch, hard to get down. So I think there's going to be some more designed quarterback runs in this game. They were working to improve him as a passer. He's got an absolute cannon for an arm, but again, he's a young guy. So he played the last half of last season, then is the full-time starter this year. And, he's a guy that people say, think has NFL future. I mean, he's a guy he's a young quarterback, but, if he has a strong year this year, which people expect, they think going into next year, he could be one of the, higher ranked quarterbacks on the board. So he's got a lot of work still to do. But there's some talented receivers, talented running game. There's a lot of hype and potential around Taylon Green, but again, tried to force some things. They ran the screenplay like 5 times in the Washington game because it was one of the only plays that was working for them. And on the 5th time, the linebacker just sniffed it out, and Taylon Green basically threw it right to their guy. It was a great play by the linebacker, but it was just a bad throw. The other one he kind of forced, and the receiver probably could have got to it, but he did have 2 picks. As I said, I think was trying to force some stuff too much, trying to throw too much. Only had 5 rushing attempts. I think you're going to see a more balanced attack and seeing Taylon use his legs a little more on Saturday.
On the other side of the ball for Boise State, I know you said earlier that a concern was that pass defense, but who are some of the, what would you say are the strengths on that side of the ball? Are there some positions to look for, individual players?
Well, I would say another concern actually that I maybe didn't touch on much was, and again, I think a lot of this was just Washington's offense, but getting pressure on the quarterback. They only had, Penix only had 5 sacks last year, so I get it. He doesn't get sacked very much. They did sack him once on the opening drive of the game, but after that, never got much pressure at all. And so their 2 defensive ends, or edges, they call them, Ahmad Hassanin and Dimitri Washington. I rewatched the game tape. I'm not sure the announcers said their name. I mean, they just were not getting much of a pass rush. They lost a 5th-round NFL draft pick, Scott Matlock, at defensive tackle, to the Chargers. They've got some younger guys taking over there. So overall, the defensive line, I thought, played okay, especially against the run. They only gave up 80 rushing yards or something, but they were getting torched through the pass, so Washington didn't need to run. But I would say linebacker DJ Schramm is probably the best player on defense. Over 100 tackles last year. He's a preseason first-team All-Mountain West linebacker. Very smart, 6th-year player. took advantage of the COVID year, the redshirt year. His dad was a longtime coach at Utah and some other schools. He's just one of those just classic coaches' kids, talented football player. May not have a NFL future, but he's a heck of a college player. And so he's an all Mountain West linebacker, number 52, DJ Schramm, I would say, is the main guy. They've got a couple other guys, some safeties. I think Rodney Robinson at safety, number 4, started every game last year. He's back. They've got a corner, Markel Reed, number 8, who missed all of last season pretty much, got hurt in the opening game with a torn ACL. They kind of eased him back in last week, but I think he'll get more time this week. He's an all Mountain West type player at corner. But again, Dimitri Washington, 6th-year team captain, coming off the edge. They expect him to be better pass rusher than we saw in the first game. But this team lost a lot of star power on defense. They lost, 5 guys that ended up being in NFL training camps. So they feel good about the guys behind them. Andy Avalos being a defensive head coach, they feel like these guys are ready for the opportunity, but didn't see a whole lot of that in week 1.
How important is this game to Boise? Obviously, your goal is to make the NY6, and you still got to win the conference first of all. But you're looking at Tulane and other programs. Games like this can go a long way if you've got to win. If you're Boise, obviously, last week put a sour taste in everyone's mouth. How important is this game?
It's one of the bigger games. It sounds crazy to say, but for Boise State, it's one of the bigger games in the last decade, maybe. It really is, because this is a program that there's a little bit of angst amongst the fans right now. Andy Avalos has come in and has not exactly been a great start. He went 7-5 in his first season. Starts out 2-2 last year, as I said, loses the embarrassing game to UTEP on the road as like a 20-point favorite. They make the changes. They kind of catch lightning in a bottle late in the season. They finish 10-4, with the bowl win. So they get to 10 wins, but overall, with the Washington loss, which again, it was kind of expected to happen. No one expected them to win, but you look up and Andy Avalos is 17-10 as Boise State's head coach here. And you're talking about Chris Peterson going 92-9 or whatever it was, it just hasn't been the same here. They've also uncharacteristically lost some home games the last couple of years. They had a stretch there in the early 2000s, I think from 1999 to 2014, they went 104 at home and over a 15-year period. And you're talking they're 8-5, I think, on the blue the last 2 years. They're 10-6 at home the last 3 years. So they've had some struggles. Now they've had some talented teams come in. Oklahoma State came in, a ranked BYU team came in. Fresno State's been pretty good. But they've lost to some good teams, but that didn't matter in the past. They would win at home no matter who they played. So I think losing some home games, losing some games overall. Again, just the direction of the program, big picture. They could lose this game and very easily run the table and go 10-2. There's a lot of winnable games still left on the schedule. And I do think that no worse, they're going to be 9-3. I still think this team is a good team, whether they win or not on Saturday. The Mountain West, I think, is going to be, they should go 8-0 in the Mountain West this year. Going to Memphis could be a little bit of a tricky game. They still go to Fresno, which is going to be a tough game, at San Diego State. They've got a couple tough games, but I just feel like for the interest in the program, for the ticket sales for the rest of the season, for the donations they're trying to get, I know UCF's doing something similar, but Boise State's, about to break ground essentially after the football season. It's going to happen. It's been approved for this North End Zone project where they're going to put fill in the bowl, add some seating, update the locker rooms, and do a big end zone project that they want to do. They still need to raise some more money for that and some funding, even though the project is going to happen. But just for a lot of reasons, interest in the program, ticket sales, future national conference realignment talk, the national brand of Boise State. Starting at 0-2 isn't something that a lot of people, really are looking at and would be very happy with. So, and then you throw in the fact that it's a Big 12 team coming in. It's a team that, as I said, a lot of Boise State fans feel like they should have gotten this opportunity, not UCF. I know there's a lot more to it than just football success. It's market size, all that kind of stuff. It's hard to argue against UCF, but just from a straight football perspective, a lot of fans in Boise feel like this should be them in the Big 12. So I think that adds a little juice to it as well. But it's a massive game. They're debuting a brand new scoreboard. They got the new LED lights.
Yeah.
But again, it's not going to be dark for most of the game, so I don't know if the new light show will really be seen. But there's a lot going on, and it's been an anticipated game for a long time. But they've, if they start 0-2, man, it won't be pretty around here.
Last thing, this is actually going to be a popular road trip for UCF fans. I think pulling everyone on our message board over the summer. I think number one trip is Oklahoma, and number two by far was Boise. There's a lot of people more excited to make this trip than they are to go to Manhattan or Lubbock, Texas. Just kind of tell us, what UCF fans are going to discover, when they come to Boise. A lot of people going for the first time visiting Idaho. Just what is the area like, and what is the atmosphere going to be like inside the stadium on Saturday?
I am going to say this first. I'm a Big 12 guy myself. I went to Kansas. And so if you're looking for another road trip to make, I say go to Lawrence, Kansas for the Kansas game, because that's a sneaky, awesome town. You got Kansas City right there, and it's an awesome town, some great restaurants, go Massachusetts Street. So it's a sleeper road trip, but I say the Kansas game you'd really enjoy. About Boise, though, it's just an awesome town, a lot of great restaurants. 8th Street's kind of the area where there's a lot of outdoor patios and restaurants and microbreweries and stuff. 6th Street is more of the college bar scene kind of town area. They've got some beautiful hikes and things you can do. Heck, if you the official rafting, thing's not open, but if you go buy a $30 raft at Walmart, you can still float down the Boise River right through downtown, right by the football stadium. A lot of hiking, a lot of cool things to do. It's an awesome town, man. Beautiful time of year too. It's going to be nice weather on Saturday, and a lot of nice restaurant spots. The James right across the street from the stadium is an awesome outdoor rooftop patio kind of overlooking the stadium. So a lot of great spots, and I think it's a long trip. I get it, but it'll be worth your while if you're coming. It's going to be Boise's an awesome town.
All right, man. Well, I appreciate it, BJ. Thank you.
Looking forward to it, man. Should be fun on Saturday. Thanks for the time.
All right, thanks.